everyone, this is Mike from badmagicplayer.com. Today I've got you a deck tech analysis of the Living End deck in Modern. This version is the one I've played last week in a PPTQ that I lost in the semifinals to the Abzan Collected Company combo deck, even though I did beat the same deck with a different opponent in top 8. So it can be done. But today we're talking about this deck. Travis Wu from Channel Fireball invented this deck a couple years ago when Modern was first getting going. And this is kind of a similar list based on what's been going around online. I didn't build this. I didn't brew it at all. I just picked it up and I'm starting to play it. I have a few choice cards that are different than some of the stock lists, and I'll go through that here in a second just so you can understand what's happening. And then don't forget to check out another video after this that shows a demo of how the deck works and some tips on how you can play it in paper format to prevent some confusion and help your opponent understand what you're doing when you're playing the deck. So let's get to it. So the first thing is the purpose of this deck is essentially to cast Living End. Now Living End can either be cast for free off of a Cascade card, which I'll show you in a second, or it can be suspended for 3 turns using 4 mana, as you see there. And essentially what Living End does is we exchange all the creature cards in our graveyards for both players and all the creature cards that are in play. We sacrifice the creatures that are in play, and we exile the creatures from the graveyard and bring them into play. So this deck is designed to just get Living End on the stack and cast as cheaply and efficiently as possible while spending tons of card draw and time getting more threats into the bin to come back alive. So you'll see there are a ton of cycling cards and creatures that their whole purpose is to get into the graveyard so that they can come back alive with Living End. So as I said, you can either suspend Living End for 4 mana, or you can use a Cascade card. Now for those of you who are unfamiliar with Cascade, because you haven't played it with a card like Bloodbraid Elf, you have Cascade is the effect that when you cast a card with Cascade, so like Violent Outburst here, you reveal and exile the cards from the top of your library to exile a non-land card, so a spell that costs less than the card you just cast. So in this case, Violent Outburst costs 3 mana, so we're looking for a card that costs 2 or less, and you'll be able to cast that if you want. It's a May ability. You cast that, put that on the stack on top of Violent Outburst so that it'll resolve first. So we would cast Violent Outburst, we would reveal cards on the top of our deck, and the only card in the whole 75 card deck here is Living End, which costs 0 because it has no convert mana cost in the upper corner. The suspend cost is alternative cost, doesn't count towards the converted mana cost. So Living End will be the card you find off of these Cascade cards, and you'll be able to cast it for free if you want. So the idea is you have an instant Cascade in Violent Outburst, and you have a sorcery Cascade card in Demonic Dread. Now Demonic Dread requires a target, so you or your opponent has to have a creature, which can be kind of tricky. But most decks in Modern have like a Birds of Paradise or some early card creature that you'll be able to target with. And additionally, if they don't have one, we have some Beast Withins, and you have other 3 mana creatures that you can play earlier on, like a Simian Spear Guide if you have to, or Fulminator Mage that can help get the target that you need for Demonic Dread. Violent Outburst doesn't require a target, and it's an instant, so it's great to, at the end of your opponent's turn, to go ahead and cast Violent Outburst, Cascade into Living End, and then have a team of sweet, juicy cyclers that are in the graveyard come back alive and ready to attack on your turn. Speaking of cyclers, we've got some interesting creatures here that normally wouldn't see play in Modern and seem pretty terrible compared to things like Tarmogoyf and Bob and some of just the general good creatures that you see. Kitchen Finks. We've got Monstrous Carabid. It's a 4/4, has to attack, but if you notice, you'll see cycling for black or for red. Meaning cycling, if you're not familiar with, all it is you're just exchanging the card by paying its cycling cost, and then you're going to draw a different card. So you're pitching this card to the graveyard and drawing a different card. So you have several things like Monstrous Carabid, you have Deadshot Minotaur, which is a green-red cycler, you've got a blue-black cycler with, you only have the black mana, but even though you can't hard cast it with the blue mana, you're still going to get that effect. You have plenty of black mana to pitch it, and you're going to get that sweet effect when it comes back into play. Sometimes you'll be able to lock your opponent out of the card that they need, like a Supreme Verdict, to stop the advantage you've gotten from Living End. Street Wraiths, free cycling, pay 2 life. It's bad against burn, but you're able to get the cards into your graveyard for cheap without having to worry about mana. It also lets you have no land hands or one land hands and draw even better, just because you have these cards that will cycle into good stuff. Plus, Swamp Walk helps a lot in a modern format with lots of black splashes and shock lands that all are kind of swamps. 2 Jungle Weavers, just extra cycling. They're 5/6, but they cost 2 mana for cycling, so they're not as good as all these 1 mana cyclers. You'll notice Deadshot Minotaur, Monstrous Carabid, Architects of Will, they cost 1 mana. Street Wraith costs none. So we only have 2 Jungle Weavers. We also have a Twisted Abomination, which swamp cycles, so you can pay 2 mana and find a swamp, like a Overgrown Tomb or Blood Crypt, or just a basic swamp if you need it. Plus, it's a 5/3 body that goes in the graveyard. It's going to come back alive. So again, the whole idea is get all these cycling creatures into the graveyard, then cast one of these Cascade cards, Cascade into Living End, cast Living End for free, go nuts, kill your opponent. To help and aid that, we have a few other key utility cards. 3 Simian Spirit Guides help you power out the combo a little faster. Also, it's great if you can go turn 2 Simian Spirit Guide into a Fulminator Mage to blow up their land, or Beast Within to blow up something like a Rest in Peace. Just powers it out just a little faster. Speaking of Beast Within, a Fulminator Mage, 3 Beast Withins catch any permanent that matter. We can help it bait out a counterspell by trying to attack a land. You can stop the pesky enchantments like Rest in Peace or Bitter Blossom or other issues that just are annoying. And then plus, later in the game, you can destroy your own lands to have another 3/3 to make sure you seal the deal. Fulminator Mages are amazing in Modern. Everybody's got tons of non-basic lands. Plus, you're sacrificing them so they go to the graveyard, and you can put them back into play with Living End to keep chaining the land destruction. To aid with a little bit more land destruction, I've got 1 Avalanche Rider. Some people play 2, some people play none. I just like to have that 5th one, mostly because I expect to see Tron quite often, and just being able to destroy an Urza's land when you need to on turn 4. You don't care about the Echo, put it in the bin, and then Living End it back into play again. So you're just getting some more land destruction. In addition, I have 2 Fairy Macabres, Macabere, however you want to pronounce it, it doesn't matter. It's not relevant for the Magic game. But we got 2 of them anyway. And what they do is you just discard them, you exile up to 2 target cards from any graveyard, or from all the graveyards. So you're going to discard this creature. It's going to go to the bin in the graveyard, meaning that it's going to be back for Living End, right? So more creatures and more fodder to help beat your opponent down. But the ability is amazing because you'll be able to exile 2 cards from your opponent's library or graveyard if you want, and you pick either the good cards like flashback cards that you don't want them to be able to flashback, or Snapcaster back. You can hit cards like Kitchen Finks that has a persist counter, or Rancor when it's waiting to come back from the graveyard. And you can also get rid of creatures that are good that you don't want your opponent to come back from Living End. So if you Living End once and you kill a couple creatures, you can discard Fairy Macabre and eliminate those creatures from coming back. Because Living End, again, brings the creatures back from the graveyards. They go to exile and then come into play. So if you've already killed some, or they have some in their graveyard, they're going to come back into play. So Fairy Macabre helps you eliminate those threats for later. Lands, you've got Blackcleave Cliffs, 3 of those, 3 Copperline Gorges. Most of your lands going to come into play untapped. Those are the only lands that will come into play tapped conditionally, outside of the 3 shock lands if you don't pay 2 life. But generally, because you are only trying to get to 3 mana to fire off the combo, those are great. You have 4 Bloodstained Mires, which will help you find 2 basic swamps, 2 basic mountains, and then 1 of each of the 3 combinations of these colors that we're playing with, the Jund colors. We have 1 forest in there, basically just to hope we catch it. We only need, if you notice, we only have a couple green spells in the deck, with 3 Beast Withins and the Violent Outburst. I believe are the only blue ones, considering if you're not hardcasting Deadshot Minotaur, which you can later. It's okay, 5 mana for 3/4. Sometimes, in desperate times, it's worth casting it. But since we're really only focused on Beast Within and Violent Outburst, having the 1 forest just gets us like pretty much a 5th or 6th green source. And if someone gets Path to Exiled, you're able to fetch it up if you want it. So that's the land. Looking at the sideboard here, this is actually off 1 card from what I played the other day. I have 2 Leyline of Sanctities on my board. They're really important for Burn and Pyromancer's Ascension, which are just so bad matchups that you have to have at least 2 in the board just for those matchups, even though you can't cast them in your deck because you have no white mana. You just kind of have to mulligan or hope that you have them in your opening hand. I know it doesn't seem like a great strategy, but you have to understand that the burn matchup is so bad that you have to have these as an option. Really, I would like to just have 4 ley lines just to make sure I get them, and also in case I get multiples to help against Destructive Revelry. But it's a dead card after you draw them, which isn't so bad. Again, ley line is so important that you really need it to have a chance in the matchup. 2 Gnaw to the Bones kind of back it up, giving a lot of life based on the creatures in your graveyard. Some people play Brindlebore, but I prefer Gnaw to the Bone. Either one it's kind of your personal preference. But Gnaw to the Bone also can come in against elves and some of the more aggressive strategies like White Weenie and things that you just need to gain zoo, where you need to just gain some life. 2 Shriek Maws are good against burn to eliminate Goblin Guides and Monastery Swift Spears and their Eidolons of the Great Revel. This also comes in against the zoo decks and the Collected Company decks just to kind of pick off a creature. Now, remember what I said about creatures coming back once you've killed them when you cast Living End? Well, Shriek Maw is going to be in your graveyard after you evoke him, so he'll come back in and kill that same Tarmogoyf for that same Scavenging Ooze that you got rid of on turn 2. So you don't have to worry about that. Plus, you'll have the 3/2 Fear. 3 and Get Chewers are good for Tron and Affinity, and any other kind of decks like 8 Rack that just have artifacts you want to get rid of. 2 Ricochet Traps, those are good for blue. If they cast a counter spell, you trap them by playing red. Because remember, when they cast the counter spell, that's the blue spell being cast this turn. Once they put that on the stack, so you can pay red and make the counter spell like Mana Leak target Ricochet Trap, which Ricochet Trap will fall off the stack and Mana Leak or the counter will fizzle. Note that it does say change the target of target spell with a single target, meaning the counter spell essentially has to have 1 target. So if they Cryptic Command and target and choose the options to bounce a permanent and counter the spell, that's 2 targets. So you're only going to be able to trap a Cryptic Command if they choose the non-target, only one of the targeting abilities and choose a non-targeting ability. So for example, I won a game the other day because my opponent cast Cryptic Command, countering my Living End and drawing a card. Well, countering Living End was only 1 target because draw a card doesn't have a target, so I was able to trap it and redirect the Cryptic Command's counter to the Ricochet Trap, pretty much fizzling it out. We've got a Reclamation Sage is kind of a catch-all against things like Rest in Peace, more Affinity Hate with a body, and that sort of thing. Corrosive Grip is good against Twin, and for the same reason that we would play Reclamation Sage. And 2 Slaughter Games, which are really good against the Collected Company combo deck, the Pyromancer's Ascension, Ad Nauseum, and anything else that just, the Living End Mirror, if that ever happens, anything you want where you can just rip out a card and really, really stunt the potential for your opponent to win. Ultimately, I think I want at least 1 more Fairy Macabre back in the sideboard. I think I would actually take out the Reclamation Sage in exchange for the second one. Again, there is a second leyline in here, that's why it only says 14. So that would be the 15th card. So having a 3rd and maybe a 4th Fairy Macabre or Macabre to get in there for the Collected Company matchup, I think would be really helpful. And so don't forget to check out the demonstration video where I just kind of show you the basics of how the deck functions, and hope you guys enjoy the deck. Again, I didn't create it, but I'm having a blast playing with it, and hopefully you guys will too. So good luck, and just try not to be a bad Magic player like me.